Hi, everyone. Today we're studying section 5.1, radical functions and radical expressions. In this video, we'll cover the parts of a radical expression and then we'll do problem number 1. If you notice this figure, you see that the number that will be outside the root is called the index. The number under the root is the radicand, and the whole thing is called a radical. So when you have a non-negative number, the square root of a is the positive or non-negative square root of a. And the negative square root of a is the negative square root of a. The principle of square roots states that for any number k, if x squared equals k, then x equals plus or minus k. So what does that mean? What we're thinking about here is that when I take the square root, what can I plug in for x to make this statement true? So when I start with x squared equals 9, for example, what values could I plug in for x to make the statement true? And the answer is a positive 3 or a negative 3. Remember, when you plug something in to evaluate, you always plug it in parentheses. So when I plug in a negative 3 and square it, it is negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive. So there are two values that can make the statement true, 3 or negative 3. When I take 3 squared, it's 9, and negative 3 squared is 9. So how do I figure that out? Well, the process for solving an x squared would be take the square root of both sides. So now we have this principle of square roots. Anytime you take the square root, you need to remember plus or minus. So the square root of x squared is plus or minus the square root of 9. All right, let's try to simplify the following. What is the square root of 64? So this means what times what gives me 64? And it's got to be the same number. So the square root of 64 is 8. Now, why don't I need plus or minus 8? Because I'm not solving. If I had x squared equals 64, then there's two values for x. But here I'm just starting with, oh, what's the square root of 64? 8. Okay. What about the square root of negative 81? Well, I can change that into the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 81. And we've already learned the square root of negative 1 is I. So what's the square root of 81? 9. So this becomes 9i. What about C? When we have fractions, we can also split up the radical, the root of 1 over the root of 100. What's the square root of 1? 1. What's the square root of 100? 10. 10 times 10 gives me 100. So for letter C, the answer would be 1/10. And notice D and B are different because in B, the negative is under the root, which produces I. On D, the negative is outside the root, which produces a negative out front. You just leave it alone. So this would be negative and then square root 1 over square root 16, which would be negative 1/4. It's going to be exciting to study more about radicals. Now you have a good start. We'll see you next time.